No, it'll be up to us to perfect Gaia. One generation only.
Welcome to Legends, a series that delves into the lore within Horizon Zero Dawn, a world with an abundance of powerful and moving history begging to be explored. Today, we will be examining a theory that has risen to some prominence amongst the Zero Dawn community, principally concerning Ted Faro. But before we examine his potential fate, I'd like to begin with a seemingly unrelated question. How did Aloy come to be? Now, if you have played through the main story, this may seem obvious. As a result of Hades attempting to seize control from Gaia, she initiated her self-destruct sequence to prevent a second total extinction of life on Earth. Before this, however, Gaia ordered a cradle facility using genetic material in cryostorage to gestate a reinstantation of Elizabeth Sobek, to permanently purge Hades from the system. This clone of Gaia's creator would be our main story's protagonist, Aloy. What may not be such common knowledge is how Dr. Sobek's genetic material found itself within the cradle facility in the first place. To answer this question, we have to begin with Gaia's subfunction Eleuthia and its alpha, Patrick Bouchard Klein.
Welcome to Eleuthia, the crown and king of Gaia's subordinate functions. For it is by Eleuthia that the human race will continue to exist. I am Patrick Bouchard Klein, the alpha in charge of this program. Now let one thing be perfectly clear from the outset. Eleuthia is not a genetic engineering project. Our goal is to preserve the human genome, not alter it. A snapshot of human genetic diversity, literally frozen in time. The genetic quintessence of our species, unmodified.
This process captured genetic samples the world over, to be cloned and reintroduced when the world was once again habitable. But this snapshot of genetic diversity was not the only purpose this technology would serve. With the tech supplied by Klein and subsequently Far Zenith, Dr. Elizabeth Sobek engineered the Lightkeeper Protocol. Only mentioned twice within the lore of the game, this half-completed idea of Dr. Sobek inadvertently saved the lives of Zero Dawn's alphas, but also may have opened the door to more nefarious possibilities. This passage is taken from Sobek Journal 1-1566, after she had informed her fellow alphas their evacuation to the Sanctuary of Elysium would not be possible, as Zero Dawn was not yet wholly completed and they must remain at Gaia Prime for the rest of their natural lives.
So here we are, setting up Gaia Prime. And yeah, such a close thing. Makes me feel nauseated all over again when I contemplate how the fate of life could hinge on coincidence. If I'd never proposed the Lightkeeper Protocol, there never would have been living spaces constructed here. If I'd abandoned the protocol sooner, the necessary life support systems never would have been installed. If. At least we won't have to endure the creepiness of raising and training clones of ourselves. The genetic material was never processed out of the cradle sites. This was not even possible. For which I'm glad. I really, really wouldn't want to spend time around a young Travis Tate, raised by Travis Tate. No, it'll be up to us to perfect Gaia. One generation only.
It would appear at one point Dr. Sobek felt it would be advantageous to have the genetic makeup of her team, arguably the greatest minds in their respective fields at the time, be preserved to be cloned. Then to take part in Apollo to gain the knowledge and expertise of their genetic match and continue to maintain and perfect Gaia and her subordinate functions. Then a change of heart saw her scrap the protocol, but not before the basic infrastructure had already been completed. Living quarters within Gaia Prime had already been constructed, as well as genetic makeup of the alphas already being gathered, but only held in off-site cradle facilities. This is why Gaia had access to the genetic makeup of Elizabeth Sobek and birthed Aloy from cradle facility Eleuthia 9. Knowing this, before Lightkeeper Protocol was scrapped, it can be assumed that the genetic makeup of all other essential Zero Dawn personnel was gathered as well, a list that may have at one point included Ted Faro. From this point forward, we're delving into a world of the purely speculative, as this theory requires us to make some rather large assumptions. What we do know is that Ted Pharaoh was not residing within Gaia Prime or the Sanctuary of Elysium post-Zero Day. He survived within Thebes, his own personal bunker, apparently choosing to live out the rest of his life in solitude. Little confirmed information is known about this bunker, leaving the lore surrounding Thebes shrouded in mystery. The next piece we know is that the technology used to create the artificial wombs of Eleuthia were not a product of Zero Dawn, but the future consortium, Far Zenith, who had developed them for the Odyssey project. These 2 points are the entry to this theory. During the active lifespan of Lightkeeper, let's assume that Pharaoh's genetic makeup was gathered and stored. Next, knowing that Far Zenith was the original creator of the birthing pods makes it far more likely Pharaoh would be able to obtain one. The reason being that outside of Oswald Dalgard, the other remaining 76 members of Far Zenith were kept secret. All we do know is that they were comprised of the world's wealthiest and most powerful individuals. Being the world's first trillionaire, it's very likely Pharaoh was well acquainted with those involved in Far Zenith, if not a member himself. So perhaps the reason for his solitude within Thebes was not a product of extreme shame or guilt, but because he had plans that remained unfinished. Plans that in some way he felt could redeem his legacy after he was gone. After using his Omega clearance to purge Apollo, then murder the Zero Dawn Alphas, what became of Pharaoh is a mystery. What this does demonstrate is that Ted had a degree of control over the functions of Zero Dawn that was second to none. This theory now unfolds as such. After the purge, Pharaoh lives out the rest of his natural life within Thebes, but not before he sets in motion a plan to produce a successor via the Lightkeeper infrastructure and birthing chamber supplied by Far Zenith. Though he claims to have eradicated all traces of Apollo, he saves a single copy for the use of his clone in the distant future, as well as a mission. Ted Pharaoh has been viewed as a world hero once before, and in one iteration or another, he would be again. This clone would be the sole benefactor of Apollo's knowledge in the 31st century, and would fully grasp the complexity of Zero Dawn. In order to become the savior he was born to be, a crisis of equal proportion would have to arise, or be created. Using the Omega clearance of the original Ted Pharaoh, this clone would send a signal from Thebes to Gaia Prime to awaken the Hades subfunction of Gaia, beginning the suffocation of all life on Earth. Then, when all would seem lost, a man would emerge from obscurity and miraculously return life to the world, and would not only be seen as a hero, but a god among men. This would not go according to plan, since instead of relinquishing power to Hades, Gaia destroyed herself to prevent him from his purpose, setting in motion what would be the driving story of Horizon. As you can see, a great many assumptions have to be drawn to make this theory possible, the most far-fetched of which, in my opinion, being that this theory would seem to hinge on the death of Elizabeth. While living, it seems unlikely she would have allowed Pharaoh's mental state to deteriorate as it did. Also, unless Ted had always planned on betraying the Zero Dawn personnel, that he and Dr. Sobek would share the same level of clearance, making the events that unfolded after her death impossible if she had been alive. No purge of Apollo would make the knowledge of Pharaoh's clone, frankly, unremarkable, and creating the opportunity for a rise to power far more difficult in an enlightened world. Though the mystery surrounding Pharaoh's bunker leaves a wealth of possibilities open to conjecture, this theory isn't quite concrete enough to convince me that this was the origin of the unknown signal. One final bit of information did pique my interest to this theory. Pharaoh had an affinity for ancient Egyptian culture, most likely due to his name. The chariot line of robots share this distinction, being the Scarab, Kopesh, and Horus. And finally his bunker, Thebes, named after the ancient capital of Egypt itself, a known seat of power to the pharaohs of old, with a history lined with glory, defeat, and rebirth. If this is of any consequence, I can't say for certain. But if Pharaoh was to rise again, Thebes may be more than a fitting opening chapter to his self-aggrandizing prophecy to become the most powerful man in the world once more. And with that, our journey comes to an end. If you'd like to see more content like this, likes and shares are always appreciated. And if you really like what we're doing at the channel, come join our community and hit that subscribe button. Are you convinced the second coming of Ted Pharaoh is going to destroy the world once again? or just have an awesome idea for our next episode of Legends, let us know in the comments down below. And until next time, thanks for watching and keep questing.